Hello, y'all. This is Rational Vids, and today we're going to talk about a very serious topic that's happened in the news It's been in the news for a few days. So, if you're not living under a rock, you've probably already heard about this. But there was a mass shooting at a Buffalo grocery store known as Tops. You can see right here. Um, it was a mass shooting committed and this was undoubtedly an evil hate crime. It was a racially motivated hate crime by a white supremacist shooter. Um, Killed 10 people, a majority of them African American. Um, Absolutely abhorrent, horrible crime. And very saddening impact to the overall community. I'm going to read an article by MSNBC, and I don't trust MSNBC because it's mainstream corporate media. But I'm just reading the article just because it's like the first one I found, and it has to do with some stuff in my home state. Buffalo shooter's Twitch video presents a test case for Texas and SCOTUS. Why the Supreme Court should freeze a bill that seeks to limit when large social media sites can moderate any of their users' content. Saturday horrific shooting at a Buffalo supermarket, which killed 10 local residents and injured 3 more, was briefly live streamed on Twitch by a suspect apparently motivated by an anti-black white supremacist theory. If you don't know, this is known as the Great Replacement theory, which is a bullshit white supremacist conspiracy theory talking about how, due to interracial marriage and just more minorities, they're going to replace the white population in the U.S. and the U.S. is a white country and all all that, that fucking molding by white supremacists. That's really bad. And white supremacists be triggered on r/poll and 4chan and all that crap. So yeah, obviously horrible. Not surprisingly, Twitch took the stream down within 2 minutes, and it and other social media platforms have pulled down countless follow-on posts linking to various recordings or rebroadcasts of the video. That's a good thing. Social media platforms should have the ability to suppress the spread of violent or otherwise offensive content, rather than have to allow any user to post any content at any time. Otherwise, imagine if it was impossible to open Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube without being bombarded with speeches by Hitler, animal cruelty videos, or hardcore pornography. But if any of those videos originated in Texas, trying to shut them down may well have violated a stunning new Texas law known as HB 2.0 that seeks to limit when large social media sites can moderate any of their users' content. So, if you don't know, Texas did pass this social media company restriction law, which allows people to me, honestly, it broadens free speech by allowing people to post content that they want to post. Now, there is some restrictions on the First Amendment, like posting pornography, just like hardcore pornography, like online, like especially like child pornography is obviously illegal. Posting like, speeches by Hitler. I mean, by the way, I don't know many people who do that. And animal cruelty videos, I can't imagine anybody would post stuff like this. Any decent person would post things like that. But this is it's a tough intersection on the First Amendment, isn't it? It's like, to me, I tend to be a very, very, very free speech guy on the left, and I tend not to like when huge social media companies like censor just somebody's political speech. It's like, regardless of whether it's on the left or the right. So, but when it comes to violent graphic content, like, content that's like it's video, like live video of mass shooting, like killing people, I think there's basic regulations. So this law was blocked by a federal judge in Texas, was blocked by a federal judge in Austin, who ruled that it violated the First Amendment. But last week, a divided 3-judge panel of the Fifth U.S. Circuit of Court of Appeals, if you don't know, that's a very conservative circuit, currently hearing challenged that ruling, issued an unsigned, unexplained order that put HB 20 into immediate effect. The plaintiffs challenging the Texas law have sought emergency relief from the Supreme Court. And the video from Saturday's shooting is just one of the countless examples of why the justices should agree to do so, and quickly. HB 20 was enacted by the Texas legislature and signed into law by Governor Greg Abbott last September in response to debatable claims that large social media platforms were routinely discriminating against and censoring conservative political viewpoints. One high-profile example cited by supporters of the law was when former President Donald Trump was permanently banned from Twitter. Of course, that's not a good precedent to set, because then you start banning speech that you agree with and you post as a lefty, but it gets barred too because social media platforms are now on an agenda-based narrative rather than just like of course you should censor violent graphic content and shit like that. I mean, like shit like that should be on like more restricted sites. But not like mainstream social media platforms where everybody can see it, you know. It's like to that end, the bill makes it unlawful for companies to censor a user based on the specific content of their posts, even if that content is clearly objectionable. Although the bill has an exception for content that directly incites criminal activity or includes specific threats of violence against individuals or groups based upon various characteristics. So that would definitely cover the shooter's live stream. It has no exception for content concerning crimes already committed, such as the Buffalo shooter's live stream. So why would you, so first off, why would you want to censor like content that is clearly objectionable, obviously, but also like something that everybody should see to ridicule this white supremacist terrorist, you know, for just ridicule how stupid his manifesto is and like how awful, you know, his inspirations were. His inspirations were based on the Christchurch shooting that happened in New Zealand a few years ago, and the Walmart shooting that happened a couple years ago. Remember that one? That was at the Walmart in El Paso. And so there's a lot of reasons as to why this shooting happened, too. So just before HB 20 was set to go into effect last December, Austin-based Judge Robert Pittman issued an injunction barring Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton from enforcing it. In a 30-page opinion, Pittman held that social media platforms have a First Amendment right to moderate content disseminated on their platforms, and that HB 20 was likely a violation of that right insofar as it could compel platforms to disseminate objectionable content. Pittman also explained in detail why allowing HB 20 to go into effect would cause irreparable harm. As he concluded, HB 20 prohibits virtually all content moderation, the very tool that social media platforms employ to make their platforms safe, useful, and enjoyable for users. So we're getting into two different kinds of moderation here. If you're censoring content that obviously is like violent and graphic and, you know, incites more violence, it's like a live footage of a shooting which killed people. It shows a shooter like aiming at people and killing them on live TV. Like, obviously that's going to be very, very sensitive content to post. For example, also like hardcore pornography, you know, including especially like zoophilia or like child pornography and shit like that. Like, of course that should be censored everywhere. So you don't want to have content that's like, you just like, there's obviously a line that has to be drawn in the sand somewhere. And I think there's an obvious clear-cut line that I don't think the video from this shooter can be like, I don't know. It's a hard topic to talk about. Like, what is the line on free speech? Texas appealed Pittman's ruling to the Fifth Circuit, which held oral argument last Monday. 2 days later, the Court of Appeals issued its unsigned, unexplained order staying Pittman's injunction and putting HB 20 into effect, noting without any further explanation that the panel is not unanimous. By Friday, the plaintiffs had asked the Supreme Court to vacate the Fifth Circuit stay and put HB 20 back on hold while Texas's appeal works its way through the courts. In recent years, the Supreme Court's consideration of emergency applications, part of its larger shadow docket, has received increased public attention and criticism. As I've written, over the past 5 years, the justices have handed down a growing number of unsigned, unexplained orders that have had enormous real-world impacts, from blocking California COVID restrictions to not blocking Texas's 6-week abortion ban, from blocking the Biden administration's vaccination or testing requirement for large employers to putting back into effect Alabama's new congressional district maps, after 2 lower courts said they violated the Voting Rights Act. Reasonable people can and surely will disagree on the merits of these decisions, but critics like me have argued that the conservative majority is increasingly taking procedural shortcuts to reach those decisions, shortcuts that it seldom deigns to defend. In early April, for instance, the justices, by a 5-4 vote, put back into effect a Trump-era rule concerning the Clean Water Act that had been enjoined by a federal district court. There was a no-majority opinion, which meant there was no explanation for how the district court's ruling was causing the kind of irreparable harm that's a necessary prerequisite for such relief. In a dissenting opinion that was joined not only by Justices Stephen Breyer and Sonia Sotomayor, but also by Chief Justice John Roberts, Justice Alina Kagan, complained that the majority was once again abusing the shadow docket for when the court grants emergency relief without accounting for which side will suffer more harm in the interim. That renders the court's emergency docket not for emergencies at all. The Fifth Circuit's unsigned, unexplained order. So this is why we should not have decisions going through courts. I tell you that all the justices on the courts and the judges have become more and more corrupted based on their personal and political views. Like, do you expect these justices to be impartial? No. They are clearly going in a partisan direction towards a more conservative worldview, at least according to MSNBC. And you could say that justices can also be partisan in a more liberal view as well. But, and I agree with the liberal view, but it's still partisan. Justices need to be neutral and rule what's in the best interests of public health. Like, they should not be issuing opinions that are politically biased in any way. That is my opinion of justices. The Supreme Court is for example, if the Supreme Court overturns Roe versus Wade, then it's obviously that's obviously a more conservative bias. Samuel Alito's opinion, and I read the opinion, is very, very, very wrong. It cites a 17th century witch burner, which is just insane. Like, that should never have been an opinion that the court considered with realism and pragmatism. Like, Justice Roberts, I don't think even agreed with that opinion. But the 3 Trump-appointed justices and Clarence Thomas obviously did agree with it, because guess what? They're all conservatives. They are conservative activist justices. Almost every decision they vote on is a conservative issue. It's never in the favor of a constitutional. If it's in favor of I bet you money. Other than Neil Gorsuch's decision on Bostock versus Clayton County, which was amazing, and the other decision that was associated with that ruling, which protected employment rights for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender employees, or in employees in the overall LGBTQIA plus community. It's like literally every other decision that comes down and is handed down is always in favor of a conservative interpretation of the Constitution. It's never in favor of a living Constitution. So you can honestly, there is no correct constitutional procedure. Justices are going to be conservative or liberal and biased now. There's no neutral way to look at this. So who do we then turn to make good decisions? Congress? Last I checked, Biden was Did more police funding from Biden, which made its way through Congress very easily because it's supported by both Republicans and Democrats for the police state, did this help prevent this shooting? Did it help prevent this shooting? No, it didn't. The security guard that worked at the grocery store was also dead, shot dead by this white supremacist. This white supremacist was allowed to kill 10 fucking people before he was finally arrested. And yet there was a bunch of police funding. So obviously police funding is not working, yet that's what the Democrats are doing. You can also argue that more gun control would limit this either, because let's face it, this guy drove from outside New York. It had this all planned out for months. This guy was a far-right white supremacist QAnon guy. He clearly had a racist motivation for why he wanted to do this attack. He purposefully chose like a majority black neighborhood in order to shoot people, because he was, a racist and a white supremacist and evil. So, but did any more funding for police help mitigate any of this? Nope. If you read the Wikipedia article on this, 11 of the victims here were black. It was racially motivated. Here's it again drawn. This is this guy, this white supremacist. His manifesto was 180 pages long, and it was primarily concerning the topic of mass immigration. So it's the typical white supremacist crap. It's 673. It was like a 180-page manifesto. It promotes the white nationalist far-right Great Replacement theory of Renaud de Camus, which claims that whites are being subject to genocide through immigration and decreasing white birth rates. The manifesto claims that Jews and the elite are responsible for non-white immigration, that black people disproportionately kill white people, and that non-whites would overwhelm and wipe out the white race. According to the Associated Press, the manifesto said the attack was intended to terrorize all non-white, non-Christian people and get them to leave the country. So, obviously, it also expressed support for far-right mass shooters Dylan Roof, who was responsible for the Charleston church shooting in 2015. I remember that. God, it was the Emmanuel Baptist Church shooting. That was when the police actually gave this kid a burger at Burger King before he was executed. Absolutely unbelievably shit. And then he also had Anders Behring Breivik, which I can't remember who he was. He committed attacks in Norway. He killed people in Norway in a van bomb incident. And then Brenton Tarrant, who was the Christchurch shooter in New Zealand. So obviously this guy is a piece of shit, absolutely evil. You should burn in hell. About 28% of the document is plagiarized from other sources, especially Tarrant's manifesto. As much as 57% of the text-based ideological sections were plagiarized in this manner. This was measured by excluding the sections which consisted of internet meme images, other pictures taken from online, and logistical discussion about the equipment for the attack. The author described himself as an eco-fascist, a white supremacist, a national socialist, so Nazi, and an anti-Semite. So obviously one of the worst of the worst. He claims to have had adopted these ideological stances after visiting r/poll on 4chan, beginning in May 2020, and seeing infographic shit posts and memes at around the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. The manifesto's author wrote that he started planning the attack in January of 2022, so this was months in advance of, like 4 months in advance. And that he targeted Buffalo because it was the city with the most black residents that was closest to his home. The manifesto includes biographical information, including a birth date, which is identical to that of the shooter in custody. It also includes extensive details about preparations made for the shooting, along with a plan to travel to a majority black neighborhood in Buffalo after the supermarket attack to conduct further attacks. And he had an account on Discord too, so people knew about this. Other people knew about this shit. And they were like, go ahead. So this shooter was not only, I mean, he said he's going to claim all the time that he's going to act as a lone wolf guy. But a lot of people, other people knew this. He live streamed this on Twitch. So people were watching this crap, not reporting him to the police before he even got there. So there are multiple people complicit in this attack, in this mass shooting, in this genocide. Absolutely disgusting person. And absolutely disgusting people who would even tolerate this. It's no wonder that Twitch took this shit down. So here's some reactions. President Joe Biden offered his prayers for the victims of their families. He called the shooting a racially motivated hate crime and an act of domestic terrorism. Okay. And went on to call white supremacy a poison running through our body politic. Governor Kathy Hochul traveled to Buffalo to assist with the response. The Erie County Sheriff's Office tweeted their condolences to all the victims and their families and offered resources and personnel to assist the officers. Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, condemned the attack. Buffalo is on the Canadian border and adjacent to Fort Erie, Ontario. The mayor of Niagara Falls, Ontario, Jim Diodati, called Buffalo Mayor Byron Brown to express his solidarity with Buffalo. Flags in Niagara Falls were lowered at half-mast to honor the victims. Twitch confirmed that its service was used to broadcast the shooting. It said that the account that posted the live stream had been indefinitely suspended and that any attempts to restream the footage would be monitored and prohibited. The shooter's live stream was removed less than 2 minutes after the violence started, according to a spokesperson. It was unclear if he was still actively firing at the time. The shooting was recorded by at least one individual and posted to the site Streamable, where it acquired more than 3 million views by May 15th. 3 million people were watching this live stream. The spread of the video on the other sites has led to discussions about social media sites' liability, responses to similar content, and free speech on the sites. So, right we're in the middle of this debate about how big tech was controlling free speech. We had to have a piece of evil human shit like this live stream using Twitch's platform to live stream mass killing. And so this is only going to go more in favor of not just censoring abhorrent content like that, but just censoring stuff that just doesn't agree with the mainstream corporate political view. The shooter's belief in the Great Replacement theory has drawn increased scrutiny of Republican political and media figures who have made statements embracing or echoing the conspiracy, most prominently Fox News commentator Tucker Carlson and House Republican Conference Chair Elise Stefanik, the third highest-ranking Republican in the U.S. House. The National Review criticized the scrutiny of Carlson, saying he never mentioned Tucker Carlson and expressed his hatred for Fox News in the manifesto. I don't know if that's true or not. I would, if that's sourced, I would say this. So I do sometimes agree that maybe they're going after people like they might be going after people like Tucker Carlson unfairly, but I do remember that Tucker Carlson had white nationalists like script writers and shit like that for his show. I remember one time he had somebody from like Breitbart who was kind of confirmed as an alt-right supporter. You know, he was writing scripts for his news show. And so you wonder where Tucker Carlson gets this shit. Tucker Carlson is an establishment piece of shit who is an effective propagandist at getting like a fake populist narrative out there. In response, Carlson himself said that the suspect's manifesto was not recognizably left wing or right wing. It's not really political at all. The document is crazy. So if that's him saying that, I mean, I don't know if I believe him fully. I think that the guy tries to, well, the guy will defend himself and call something crazy when it, it's like something as evil and abhorrent as this. But my heart goes out for all the victims, all the victims that were killed by this subhuman garbage piece of crap. And, and my heart goes out to all the people who are still alive and the families that had to deal with this tragedy and heartbreak in Buffalo. Yeah. And my other criticism of this is that the police funding did nothing for this crap. Biden's police funding did absolutely fucking nothing for this crap. As it says here, some of the local black community suggested that had the shooter been black, he would have been shot by police. Comparisons were made to the shootings of unarmed black men, including by the Buffalo police. So there is obviously a racial bias to the police, and only in continuing to fund the police is not helping here at all. It's completely ineffective at preventing a mass shooting like this. This guy was live streaming this. This was live content. As it said, almost 3 million people were watching this stream. Yet he was able to kill 10 people with 13 total casualties. And this guy was able to get away with it for minutes at a time. I agree with that. If it had been a black shooter, then obviously the police would be like, oh, stop right there. We're going to shoot you. Bam. Dead. There's obviously racial bias in policing. And it still mind boggles me that both parties support arming such a bad orchard of a system. Not just a system with bad apples in it, but a bad orchard. Bad orchards all around. There is something fundamentally wrong with our policing. And they're not trying to fix it. They're trying to further aggravate it and further fund militarization. That's what Biden is doing. Both parties support the police state, and yet the police state couldn't prevent something like this, but the police state can go on and arrest people for stupid, reasons like drug use. It's just there's so much to even analyze about this Buffalo supermarket shooting that it's just obviously horrible. And what's even worse is that I don't hear people like Jimmy Dore talking about this. Jimmy Dore was somebody I look up to sometimes, and I keep trying to defend him. But more and more often, I just see him constantly not giving any credence to very serious events that happen in this country. He continues to focus on COVID and foreign affairs. And foreign affairs are important right now with the Russia-Ukraine situation, but it bothers me that he never reported on this. The shooter, by the way, this guy was 18. There are young people getting radicalized online on shit like 4chan. We have to de-radicalize all these people. We have to, for the good of this country. So not only can we need to, it's stopping and ending racism entirely and white supremacy is going to be very hard in a history where that's been historically entrenched. But de-radicalization from Poll and 4chan obviously is going to be good. And it's a wonder to me how left-wing voices like Lee Camp and Chris Hedges and everybody on RT get fucking their shit shut down, but sites like Poll and 4chan are still allowed to fester on, they're still allowed to fester online and promote, conspiracy theory crap like that. So they can radicalize more people in committing acts of right-wing, Christian nationalist, extremist, white supremacist violence. So the free speech debate is going to be a very tough one going forward, guys. It's going to be a very tough one because when it comes to very tragic events like this, very racist events like this, racially motivated, it's going to be tough. It's going to be a very complex topic to talk about in the coming future. And that's all for today, folks. If you like, subscribe to Rational Vids and like this video. Prayers and condolences to everybody who was involved in this horrible mass shooting.